What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to IndieQuest, the celebration of the indie and obscure. That sounded weird. Anyway, my name is Josh. Welcome to the show. I'm one of your co-hosts today, and I'm joined by one of my awesome co-hosts, Steve. How are you?
Doing pretty dang well. Excited to be back to our first proper episode in a long time. So we'll slide back into the rhythm of the things. But yeah, otherwise wonderful.
The ship is sailing. We're scraping off the barnacles of a regular episode so that it flows better through the tide. Anyway, also joined by the captain himself, Captain Drachma. How are you doing, Seth?
Doing great. Went to one of our favorite restaurants tonight. Had a nice steak dinner, which was nice. So I'm full and happy and ready to talk some indie games.
Was it Applebee's?
Wow. I feel like that was a huge slight at me. Oh yeah, I bet that Drachma's favorite place is Applebee's. And he goes and tells everybody, hey, have you ever heard of this restaurant? It's called Applebee's.
This local neighborhood joint, okay? Let me tell you about these 2 for $20 apps.
He's like, chill out. It's Outback, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
Nothing but the best for me.
It's actually called Kuzno's Steakhouse. It's kind of a special restaurant in Toledo, Ohio. It's been there for 80 years.
Awesome.
It's a little bit of a sidebar that no one cares about except for anybody that's from around here. But in Toledo or in Lucas County, there are these giant frogs that you can see they're like ceramic, but they're people sized. And they are out front of a lot of historic places in Toledo. And this steakhouse has it out in front of it, right? So I don't remember how many there are, maybe 20. But it's kind of when you're driving by with somebody who's from out of town, you're like, oh, look, a frog. Or they might point out, what is that frog doing there? And then it's they're out front of every kind of important to Toledo place, right? So that's kind of what, kind of a cool little thing. So little tidbit.
There you go.
Your town has lore. That's what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I respect that. I'm not a steak guy personally. So it sounds like you are. I don't have whatever gene people have that makes them really appreciate the rarest, pinkest, bloodiest, cold in the middle kind of steak. There's this arms race to get a steak as least cooked as possible. I'm a well done guy. I don't know. I don't need any pink in there. Just season it and give me the meat.
So I'll be honest. I am not the rarest I get is medium. I prefer a medium. I don't love it. I know it's not blood, and that's what lots of steak people be oh, that's not blood. Yeah. It's this other thing or whatever. Mm-hmm. Which I should honestly know that. I grew up on a farm when we raised cattle, but yeah. But that's that's part of the reason why I also enjoy steak is because I ate a lot of steak growing up. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a big snob. It's got to be rare. It's got to be medium rare. Medium's fine for me. I will say that my steak tonight was a little overdone, a little more done than so you would have loved it, Steve. That's all I'll say.
See, I would have. So that's my experience is I've literally never had a steak that I would call overdone. I don't know that it's possible on my scale. So I just order whatever I think the most cooked thing I can get away with without insulting that particular chef and or restaurant is. Right. I'm whatever the top of your scale is before you get snooty with me, that's what I'll take.
The only thing I'll say about it, though, and Josh, weigh in on this if you enjoy a rarer steak. But, for a long time, I was the same way, Steve. Throughout my childhood, I was oh, just give me well done. I don't need anything special.
Good burn. All right.
Yeah, pretty much. But going to a few steakhouses in adulthood, getting a medium or a rare steak is kind of for the texture, it's almost more buttery. It just chews a lot easier in the mouth. It's not so tough. You know what I mean? So that's something that I can appreciate about it, outside of just flavor and things like that. So
yeah, I think my base level is a medium rare.
Wow, there you go.
just Sarah loves a rare steak, so if they're cooking, it's going to be more rare probably than even I usually take it. But I'm like, hey, can you just like grill that a little bit more for me, type of thing. But,
Just a little longer.
but just a little longer. It doesn't need to be talking to me as I'm biting into it. But besides that, like, yeah, I enjoy just a little, the medium rare. I think that's pretty much perfectly in the middle for me. But I'm such a not picky eater. If somebody gave me a well done steak, I'd be like, all right, yeah, it's seasoned well. I wouldn't complain.
Right.
Yeah,
so. Exactly.
There we go. So I'm the baby on the podcast, and everyone can write their hate mail directly to me. I never grew up. I have the taste of a 13-year-old.
I feel like, and this is partially on us, but I feel like we cycle through the same 3 conversations at the beginning of this, like, weather, energy drinks. This time we came out with steaks. I feel like we did a good job. I'm confident we have never talked about steaks before. So heck yeah, guys.
Expanding our horizons.
Yeah, exactly.
What games have you guys been playing? Just to do a hard pivot. Any games you guys are working on right now that you want to talk about?
In terms of stuff that I won't bring to the show or that I might be bringing to the show?
I don't know. That's up to you. I'll just say I've been playing Metaphor. That's what all I did. I have that gamer funk on me. I've been sitting around playing Metaphor all day. So been enjoying that. Every time I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna get it. Like, this game does a good job. It's like when you feel like the dungeon's getting a little bit stale, they throw something new at you, and then they're like, when the story feels like it's dragging a little bit, it's like, no, here's a new thing. So it's like, oh yeah, I think I'll shut it down, turn it off after this dungeon. Wait, now that's happening, and it's just like, yeah, it just keeps you going. So that's the best type of game.
Yeah, it's a game that lends itself very well to just a great big binge like that too. You get this nice meaty progress. You feel like now you're right in the middle of the story and you're encouraged to keep pushing through. So I get that. I've only really, other than indie stuff that I might bring, that I have to be a little more hush-hush about, so you guys don't come in and snipe my picks, is just Last Guardian. I played Last Guardian like 3 times in a row in the last month or so. For folks that listen to Polykill, there's a whole story that you can listen to over there that's a little more, I'll say, a little more to the sensibilities of the Polykill audience than maybe the chiller, more relaxed, less disgusting vibes that we bring here. We're a little more we're a little more scholarly. Polykill's a little more after party, so you can go listen to the story over there about what I've been struggling with.
We're a little bit more frat boys going to school, and Polykill's a little bit more frat boys at night.
Yep.
I have pretty much cleanly wrapped up most of what I've been playing. Funny enough, the game that I brought to IndieQuest today, won't mention it until we get there, but I'll talk to you guys about it a little bit. I actually haven't beaten it yet, and it will be explained then. But outside of this game, I've dabbled a little bit with Persona 3 Reload every once in a while, and then, as we all do, I play a run or two of Balatro constantly.
Of course. Yeah.
I will say I've watched my wife play a lot of Astrobot lately. My boy's been into it, so he's been playing it too. But of course, every once in a while, like my wife, all about the collecting. She gets through half the level, or if she gets to a point in Astrobot where she gets a robot buddy, Astrobot companion, whatever you call them, and she realizes she missed one, right? It pops up, and she's like, oh my, wait, where is he? I looked all over. It's like, just go back and look around. Sometimes there's like areas, as you both. Obviously, Steve, I know you've played it, but you've played Astrobot too, right, Josh?
Yeah, I platinumed it too.
Oh, so. Sweet.
My guy.
Yep. So, there are some levels where it's fairly linear, so it kind of feels bad when you miss one. But there are also some where they're like quite open. So it's like, might be 3 of them that you could find almost in any order. So just circle back, find it, right? So
it's like maybe you didn't do like that spin attack at the right point in the ground or whatever. Right. Yeah.
She also is not a huge fan of bosses, so she'll always be like, Seth, when I'm doing whatever, and I got to go and fight the boss for her. So, yeah.
I don't know if she knows or if you know, but the game does have like a help you find the bot mechanic. I think it's either after you beat the level or maybe beat the area, but if you go back to a level later on, there's a bird at the beginning that you can pay small amount of coins to, and it'll like guide you towards the stuff in that level that you've missed. So if she's getting frustrated at any point, there is some in-game tools.
Yeah. We'll have to. I don't know if she's gone back to try to find any bots. She found almost every one. I think she's missing one in the first area, so I'll have to let her know that. But funny that we're playing it at all, and it all started with. I think maybe I chatted with you guys outside of the podcast, but she was looking for something to play that was like Super Mario something, right? She's into platformers, so I'm like, well, we got Astro's Playroom, right? So we played through that, and now she's all in. She is all in, which is fun. Yeah. Like that's. To have somebody who is not traditionally a video game player be super into any game is just cool. And Astrobot really lends itself well to, a younger crowd, but also people who aren't big gamers, right? It's great for that. So, and it's beautiful, gorgeous game.
Yeah, totally. I feel like you get a different perspective when someone isn't like a huge game player. Like they're appreciating things that you might take for granted, or they're getting challenged by, or like not understanding necessarily things that maybe feel like second nature to you. It's a very different type of playthrough, and it's a lot of fun to watch.
And she's going through just enjoying the collectability of everything, like finding stuff. But then as I'm sitting watching her, and she finds like one of the special bots, right? They have the costume on. I'm like that Leo meme. Look, like I'm holding my beer and pointing at the screen, and she's like, I have no idea who that is. You know what I mean? I'm like, but it makes me feel good, right? So
get in her face. You don't recognize the child from Boku no Natsuyasune? What are you doing?
Exactly.
Awesome.
Well, it's been a little while since we've done a quest log episode where we bring 3 games, so I guess we should do the rundown here if people are new to the show. Right?
Yeah.
So generally, so just to say, last 3 episodes, we haven't been doing this. So it's been a little while. It's been a little over 6 weeks. It's been almost 2 months now that we've actually done a quest log episode, which is our normal episode format. So you guys probably, if you started like 3 episodes ago, you're like, what does the show even do? It's like 3 different types now, but this is generally what a regular episode will be, is we'll have some chit chat at the top, and then we'll bring games to the quest log, which is a list of ever-growing indie game recommendations. That's IndieQuestPod.com if you want to look at that. There's 2 sections to it, the main quest and the side quest. The main quest is a banger game. It's an amazing experience. It's one of those games where you can maybe even tell Seth's wife, like, hey, this game's awesome. You should try it. Anybody's going to enjoy it. And then we have the side quest, which is still a recommended game, but it might have a caveat or 2. Maybe it's a little bit niche or like a weird genre that might not be for everybody. Or maybe it's just not quite that 10 out of 10, but it's still a recommended game. So that's the quest log. And who wants to go first today?
That's tough. Does anybody not want to go first for sure?
I don't mind going first either way. So, but you guys know what I'm bringing, I think. So
I actually don't. I mean, maybe as soon as you say it, I'll be like, oh, okay. But then
if you say Metaphor Refantasio, we're going to have to have a discussion and edit it out.
Yeah. Well, Josh, it sounds like you're volunteering, so go for it, buddy.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and volunteer. I'll volunteer for this one.
Perfect.
So it's a little game that I really love, and I want to have a deeper discussion about it. So I'm going to bring 1,000 Times Resist.
To
the quest log today.
Yeah.
I mean, I already gave it away. You guys know I love the game, but I wanted to have a more deep dive on this game. So I have a lot of notes, so let's get into it. 1,000 Times Resist is developed by Sunset Visitor. It's on Switch and PC. The description for the game is 1,000 Times Resist is a thrilling sci-fi adventure. The year is unknown, and a disease spread by an alien invasion keeps you underground. You are a watcher. You dutifully fulfilled your purpose in serving the All-Mother until the day you discover a shocking secret that changes everything. So, let's set up the world a little bit. I'll say at the top here, I'm not really going to spoil anything that isn't on the Steam page. So if you guys have read anything on the Steam page, anything I mention here won't be any big plot spoilers. So it actually does set up the story and the game pretty well. So I'm kind of basing like loosely on that and then giving my experiences along with that. So basically what happens is the world undergoes an alien invasion, and there's a pandemic all throughout the land. There's one survivor who's immune and is pretty much immortal as far as we can tell. Her name is Iris, and she basically clones herself many times over and builds this huge community. And you're playing one of those characters, one of the clones of the All-Mother, which is Iris. named a Watcher, and you're basically tasked with communing with other sisters to see Iris's past, which is basically the main setup of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Steve, you played this game, right?
Yes, I love this game. It was on my Game of the Year list last year.
And Seth, I think you said you had like a passing interest, but maybe get to it some other time, since we are both of us have already played it, right?
Yeah, it's one of those that now that we are not in the year of its release, and both of you have played it, it is one of those that is tough to justify. Although I will say, anybody out there, we already mentioned Polykill a little bit, but anybody out there that has also listed Polykill or hasn't, you should. Bingo, we do bingo. It's all about beating your backlog and stuff, but there's a square for IndieQuest specifically, where we have to beat 3 games that have been brought to IndieQuest. Most people aren't hosts of IndieQuest like we are. So my goal is to beat games that I have not already, or I'm not planning on bringing to IndieQuest. So possibly 1,000 Times Resist might be on that list sooner rather than later. So we'll see.
Heck yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll describe how the game works a little bit. The game is mostly a dialogue-driven game. A lot of it is narrative, talking to other characters. This will lead me into gameplay a little bit. It's a third person. There is a few different gameplay types. Like I said, there's the dialogue options where you're talking to the characters. There's some loose dialogue choices, which mostly add flavor text. I don't really feel like there's many that really impact the story till like later on in the storyline. And then there is... basically, when you're talking to people, they don't really animate completely. They pose and show emotion through like facial expressions and things like that. There are some cutscenes that do happen to like create more tension and things for the story, but mostly you're just going to be looking at very beautifully rendered and like well done composed scenes with characters standing and chit-chatting in them. That's most of the gameplay of the game. And then there is segments where you're going to like these dreamscape type places where you're like zooping across the map to like these grapple points to like find collectibles in the world. I don't know how else to describe it. The sound effect is literally a zoop when you do it. So
you're not wrong. Your character kind of like ragdolls, like they have like momentum as they're being like lurched from one point to the next. It's interesting. It's different from stuff I've seen in other games, and it happens pretty regularly, but it's not like a massive chunk of the game. Maybe 15% of the game total is those types of scenes. You're usually just walking around in a couple different environments and talking to people and choosing dialogue, like you mentioned. It's not a visual novel, but it's like the next closest thing if you can move around in a lot of ways.
The devs describe it as like a visual novel with a walking sim elements to it, which I would say is pretty apt for what the game is. So
yeah, very much so. Yeah, so it is a reading game for sure. I mean, there's voice acting, so it's a listening game, but it's not put your podcast up or keep working your way through one piece on the other monitor while you play type of game. This is definitely like a headphones in, like attention focused type of experience.
Yeah, lock in and see the story basically.
Yeah.
If you're not in the mood for that type of game and you decide to pick this up, right? So sometimes you go into a game pretty blind, right? And you don't want to know a whole lot about it. If that type of person decides to go into this game and they start it, are they going to fall off of it pretty quick, or does it draw you in and keep you going regardless of what type of game you're after?
It's right out the gate. It starts in some action that you don't have full context for, full in medias res or whatever it's called. And so you see something and you're like, oh, dang. Okay. And then suddenly you're in like a little bit more of a typical day-to-day. And even in that typical day-to-day, as you walk around, you're meeting interesting characters and like you're just kind of absorbing the vibe of the game. So it does enough to hook you in. I will say that the game is split up into chapters, and if by like the end of the second chapter you're still not hooked, you're still not feeling it, then it might not be the right time for you to check the game out, because it puts a pretty strong foot forward and it just keeps building on itself. And so you need to kind of have that investment and enthusiasm to keep getting more and more out of the story.
So I want to basically echo what Steve said in one of the previous episodes, because I feel like this game's brought up the last few episodes, but he said that this game is basically how Two to the Moon is like a 2D like RPG classic style. This is a PS2 era RPG style looking game, I would say. So if you can imagine like that era, even like the color palette and look of the colors, like lots of like stark bright colors and blues, and then it's kind of like in the main area, the orchard is kind of like this labyrinthian like maze area, and you will literally feel like you're in like a hub of some classic RPG, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I get real Xenosaga energy from it. Like, it's not quite that intensely sci-fi, but somewhat similar to that. And it helps that, like, you know, it's a bunch of clones, and Cosmos is a robot that's very human-like in Xenosaga, so there's like a little bit of connective tissue there. But that's the RPG I think of first and foremost when I'm comparing the two. But I don't want that to seem like an insult, because it is a gorgeous game. I would say in pretty much all aspects visually, it punches above its weight in a way. Like, even though I'm saying PS2 to describe it, it looks gorgeous. And some of the scenes are like, you know, just like stunning. Or like Josh was saying, there's not a lot of animation. It's a lot of like, imagine all the characters were kind of posed in like the most action focused part of the scene, and then they're just still as the dialogue and the events play out. Very theatery, because a lot of the developers come from a theater background. So even though that seems like what would be and probably is a like budget solution, like a way to build out more game without having the time or resources to do more animation, it works. It's very effective in the game. So they did a really good job like capturing a style that works well, that also probably was easy to develop.
Yeah. So I described the two main gameplay segments, but there are the things called as communions I brought up. So basically what you end up doing is you go into the memories of Iris. You kind of have areas where you can hit the bumpers and go forward and back in time to kind of solve like very minor puzzles. They're not super hard to figure out. Most of the time it's just like I go forward and experience the story, and then you go back to the beginning of that story or beginning of like the timeline, and you just answer some questions that are pertaining to the story. You know, it's like, oh yeah, there's a brown door, and then there's a selection of green door, brown door, yellow door. You know what I mean? At the beginning, it's super easy. As long as you experience all the timelines, you're going to solve the puzzles. I wouldn't even call this a puzzle game in any respect. I think it's just to move the story forward. But when you do those time period things, it's actually kind of cool, because it really is a tableau of that time period in a lot of ways. There are moments where like it's like there's bodies, like there's an image of this online you can see pretty easily, but there's like bodies raining down. I won't spoil what's going on, but you can walk around with the bodies like suspended in midair and kind of explore that environment, and it just looks really. Like the way they do the lighting and the coloring of all these scenes just looks so cool. So there's so many of those moments in those communion things where it's kind of dreamy and kind of like ethereal, you know, where you're in there and it just looks so stunning. And a lot of times they will change like the perspective of the camera. You'll have moments where it's 2D, and then like there'll be some things narrated, and there'll be like giant text in the skyline, or like you'll be for some reason have tank controls a little bit, kind of like walking through, and it's like they play with that formula in those communions specifically to give you that kind of like uneasy feeling, like you're trying to figure out her past and see her whole story. And as you experience that, they really do change it up quite a bit in those moments, which I thought was really creative.
Yeah, and it never introduces too many systems or like overwhelms you. It all makes sense, but those parts in particular I thought were fun, because that's where they can be a little less like I guess grounded. Like they can be forced out of how things like literally need to operate, and they can be more like, since this is a memory of a scene, you know, parts of this are true to the memory, but parts of it are like fantastical, almost like a dreamscape would be. You know, some of this is like architecture or lighting or whatever that probably didn't actually exist or couldn't have actually existed in that actual memory, but like you're remembering the fragments of it and kind of filling in the rest in these interesting out of the box kind of ways.
Yeah, and it's like there's an element of the alien presence too, and like that's felt through all these communions, because like the aliens come down, land, have this pandemic that wipes out most of the earth, you know, like that's the main setup. Sad story, obviously, but like there's some reason that Iris is the one, you know, so you're trying to kind of like, as you're doing that, that question's in the back of your mind, like, why is she so special? Is she special? Is she not? You'll find out when you play the game. I say when you play the game, because I'm going to recommend everybody to at least give this game a shot. So, but anyway, the main central highlight for this game is the story. So I'm going to go into the story as loosely as I can without spoiling anything, but they have a lot of subject matter they cover. The concept of being alive in a person, like motherhood, immigration, like Iris's parents. You do have some flashbacks to them and all about the Hong Kong riots and everything. They came to Canada, so there's some second generational immigration things going on there. Some she kind of resents her parents a little bit. She kind of doesn't have her lot in life, so you kind of see her childhood through that lens a little bit. So, and obviously the effects of a pandemic and how that can hurt people. And, you know, I feel like that's obvious what it's relating to, you know, just a few years ago, you know, and as you go through it, there's a lot of things that kind of talk about religion and religious texts and cult mentality and suppression of knowledge. Like, it's basically like Iris is the god of this civilization, but is she a flawed god? Of course not. But, you know, and then you kind of start learning a little bit more about her. So as you go, you can tell there's a lot of things swept under the rug, and you start peeling back layers as you go through the chapters of the story. And I will be honest with you guys. When you're playing this game, you're going to be like chapter 4, like, you kind of have a loose concept of what's going on, but you're really confused by about halfway through this game. And then they just start layering on everything, and then you start slowly grasping what's happening, and then at the end of the game, you just fully grasp the story, and it still has a lot of questions that you want to solve, and maybe you go watch like a deep dive video on it or something like that, listen to a podcast. But for the most part, they do bring all these crazy high concepts together. It can be messy at times, I'll be honest, but really, I do think it's a really, truly well done story for all the things they try to put into it.
I was going to ask, when you said, you know, it all comes together at the end, it reminds me of watching different movies, right? One I think of immediately is Shutter Island, where you don't have any idea what's going on the entire time until the very end. And then it's like, oh, okay, I think I understand. But you're trying to, throughout the movie, you're trying to compartmentalize all the different info, right? And the knowledge. And you're like, let's make sure I retain this because it's going to be important. So that was something, and you kind of answered it before I even asked it, but that was something I was going to ask, was like, is it tough to keep up with? But it seems like it's not, right? Like you can hold most of the knowledge, and it makes most of what it needs to do in terms of making sense at the end. So
yeah, I think the reason why it's a little difficult to like grasp what's going on is because of all the time jumping you do and those memories. And then there's a moment in the game later on where there's a lot of time jumping that's happening like in the future, going a lot of days and months ahead, and you're kind of just trying to piece together fragments of knowledge. And you're like, okay, what is going on right now? This is kind of crazy what's going on. And that part, I feel like by the time you get to that part, you're like, okay, I got to finish this out because it's getting close to the end of the game. But before then, it, like, with all the things, like, you'll go back in time and you'll be like, all right, so I'm in this high school. This is Iris's high school. Okay, I'm kind of learning a little bit about the characters. This character named Zhao, which ends up being an important character in the story, you know, and it's like you start learning a little bit more and a little bit more. And the more you learn, the more you understand. But I still, after the fact, went and watched a bunch of like breakdowns because I'm like, okay, this game just has so much to it. I just have to know everything about it. It became my identity for like a week there. Like all I wanted to know was more about this story, you know? So really, really absorbed me.
The way I feel about it is that the game it's kind of like a spider web. Like by the end, you're going to get caught in the spider web. You're going to be stuck and, you know, land with it and appreciate the game for what it is. But it's a spider web because it's constructed out of like hundreds of different strands, and all those strands are different storylines and different themes and like different things that people will resonate with differently. And so everyone that plays it is going to get like kind of a core story, and they're probably going to take something away from it. But you talk to 2, 3, 4, 5 people, they'll take different things away from it for different reasons. They'll have focused more on certain parts of the story, or they'll interpret things differently, and it all kind of feels appropriate. None of it feels like you're misinterpreting things. And I think if you were to replay it, 2, 3, 4 years after you played it originally, you take something different away from the game that you took away from it the first time. It's very dense is the word I usually say, but it's very rich. If it was a book, it would be the type of book that is in classic literature in high school, and your teacher would be like quizzing you on all the themes and stuff, because there's just a lot there.
Yeah, I don't even want to be hyperbolic. I do think that people will use this game as inspiration to write other games and other stories in the medium. Like, I think this is going to be a huge inspiration going forward, because like you said, Spiderweb's a perfect example. It's like there's so many things that they layered it so perfectly too. I feel like this might have been one of the best paced stories in a game I've ever played too, because like I said, you're confused, but you're still intrigued the whole time. You're like, what is going on? Like, okay, this is happening. Holy crap, that happened. And then the more things that happen to you, you start to be like, okay, I got to see this through. And when you do, you're like, oh my God, that was crazy. But what about this? What about that? And they do a good question. Like, there was this one thing they mentioned with this one thing. I have to be so vague; it's hard to just dive right in. But there's a bunch of things that happened with this one thing. Maybe I should look up a little, see if there's a video essay on that, and there's probably going to be, and you can watch it and get a little bit more knowledge. But this is one I definitely want to play again. But I'm going to give myself a good amount of time and then go back into it. The game runs about 10 hours, I would say 10 to 12 hours, give or take. I think that's probably me being super hunting every little thing in the environment. If you're not like me, you probably get through it faster. Soundtrack by, what's his name? I had it in my head. Something Redman. Is it Drew Redman? He did so good with the soundtrack. I think that throughout the entire thing, we played the Watcher thing on the OST last episode, and it's so good that Steve even brought it originally to the episode. So the music is just very well done for the time, for the game, and suits the themes very well. And I think layering the amazing, incredible, just show-stopping voice acting on top of that, even adds to the story and everything. When you're playing an RPG, like Metaphor, a good example, you're like, okay, I'm trying, there's a lot of dialogue here. Maybe occasionally you kind of thumb through it and don't listen to the entire conversation. In this, you're not going to want to, because the voice acting is just that killer. It really just draws you in, especially the main actress for The Watcher.
Yeah, the voice acting in particular it's weird. It's good weird, because it's delivered in a way that I've never really heard another game deliver it. It's very understated. I think the way I initially described it when I first was playing it was every line kind of sounds like a secret that the voice actress or voice actor is telling themselves. They don't want you to hear what they're saying, but they need to say it out loud. It's very hushed and almost raspy, sometimes whispery, but in a way that it fits the tone of the game, or I guess it creates the tone of the game, because it's so different from the other stuff. And there's obviously high energy moments, and there's big bombastic scenes and energetic delivery and stuff, but kind of people's normal state of being and a lot of the conversations feel understated and very human.
Yeah, and it's everybody kind of spawns from, they're all clones of Iris, and she kind of has that reserved tone. I feel like the entire community and civilization has a reserved tone to it. It's kind of hi, how are you? Kind of like you said, whispery and kind of chill but understated. And I feel like that comes from the way the whole community and civilizations ran. I think that's part of it. I love the voice acting. I love the entire package of this whole entire game, because it's unique. There's nothing going to be like I said, there might be some inspiration coming off of this game going forward. You're going to see some 1,000 times resist likes in a couple years probably, right? But it's going to be the same thing, where this is going to be the originator of this style of story. It's just really well done. There's some, I'm not going to say too much, but there are some meta narratives in there too that I don't want to spoil or say anything, which are really well done as well. But I don't have anything else to say about the game unless you guys have any questions or comments.
I have no questions. This game rules. I know where he's going to put it, but you should all play it.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out one day, especially if it's as good as you guys have said it is. I obviously can get down with a good story-focused game from time to time. So excited to hear where it's going on the quest log.
Awesome. I will, before I put it on the quest log, I'll say the 2 sticking points I had with the game is, one, I think that the game is maybe a little too long in some respects because of the wandering around, which does help set the tone at first, but does become a little tedious at times. I'll be honest with that. And then like I said, the orchard area, the main hub, is very labyrinthian, and you're having to like kind of figure your way out. But if you have the sticking points of those little points, but then you just completely forget about them because the story is so well done and captivating, then who cares, right? Like it's like not every game's perfect. I will say the story is close to perfect as I could ever imagine it being. So that's what you're here for. And all that said, I think this game is a fantastic experience. One, even if you're kind of trepidatious on it, give it a shot. Grab it on Steam sale. It's not a very expensive game. Check it out. It's a main quest with a bullet, and it was my favorite indie game last year. So check it out. 1,000 Times Resist.
Heck yeah.
Great dang video game. Heck yeah. I would have put it on the main quest too.
Awesome. So who wants to go next?
I feel like Seth can go.
All right.
I feel like he had his boots up there for that one because he hadn't played it, so I think it's time to hear from my boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will go next. So I mentioned at the top, I've not beaten this game, but it is a big backlog game for me. A game that's been sitting in my Steam library for a while and sitting in my head for a while longer than that, right? It's a game that I've seen different places for a long time. I think it's, in terms of Steam friends, right? So you can see when your Steam friends have owned the game or have it on a wish list and things like that. I think it's one of the games that I own and have now played that I have so many of my Steam friends have it on their wish list but don't own it. It's one of those, which is interesting. I don't know what people are waiting on a sale. I was waiting on a sale for a while too, but so there's a little bit of a connection to a game that has not been brought to IndieQuest, which is sort of surprising, but at the same time, I have heard Steve talk about it. This was honestly not something that I knew they were related until I looked into the dev. So, Steve, you played a little game recently and brought it to a different podcast called Void Stranger.
Oh, I did, yes. Great game.
Do you happen to know what that developer put out before Void Stranger?
Want to be ZeroRanger?
ZeroRanger is the game that I am bringing to IndieQuest today.
Heck yeah.
Josh, what do you know about ZeroRanger? Anything?
Nothing.
Really?
I'm looking at screenshots. It looks cool.
Oh, wow.
I don't know much. Don't know anything about this game.
I thought you were being coy for a minute. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, like he's going to say.
No, I actually really don't know.
Wow.
I haven't seen this game before.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it's extremely surprising, actually, that ZeroRanger has been out since September 28th, 2018, and it only has like a little over 1,000 reviews on Steam, which is wild to me because I feel like it, and you know, Josh, you hadn't heard of it, but I feel like it's a fairly popular indie, maybe just in like the circles that I dance in or something. I don't know, but it was developed by System Erasure, and it's only on PC, which is a bummer. You can only get it on Steam, but hopefully, I mean, it's now almost 7 years old, which is wild, but hopefully it comes to at least Switch at some point. It would make a lot of sense on Switch, I think. So, this is and I think that this is maybe an IndieQuest first, or it is an IndieQuest very few in terms of genre. It's a shmup, right? It's a shooter. So,
yeah.
I can't recall if there was another shmup on IndieQuest or not, but kind of cool. A little expanding our horizons again, like Josh said. We're talking about steak, and we're playing shmups today. But I will call it is a vertical shoot 'em up with layers. So Steve can probably speak to this a little bit when it comes to Void Stranger, but this dev does things right. They show you a game, and for the most part, that the game that they show you at the beginning is what it is, right? It is that genre, but they layer other things in, and they really expand upon what the genre has done in the past, I think. And that is very true of the shmup genre in ZeroRanger. So, presentation, it's kind of a 16-bit style. Looks like a shooter that might have been on Genesis or Super Nintendo or TurboGrafx. Probably, honestly, the best place it could have been on is TurboGrafx. It looks like a TurboGrafx game. Lots of green and orange, and that is purposeful. We're not into the story yet, but there is this big boss, or this big evil entity called the Green Orange, and you have no idea what it is, and that's kind of what you're careening towards throughout the game, right? You know that there's this thing called the Green Orange. It's not good. You need to eliminate it, and so obviously the color choices within the game are green and orange to kind of mirror that, I suppose. Sprites are very detailed, even though there's only a couple colors. Of course, there are different shades of green and orange and black and things like that, but detailed sprites. Enemies are detailed. Boss sprites are quite detailed. Very good-looking game, in my opinion. One of my favorite things... Not favorite, but just I love when games do this. And I took a picture of this, and Josh saw it. I don't know if Steve ever saw it because I deleted it as soon as I realized that the app itself was actually highlighted so you could see the game that I was playing. But I took a picture of my monitor and was just like, here's a little hint at what I've been playing. It's not like it would have helped you guys a whole lot, but I had my monitor turned vertically, which a lot of people work that way. Like, it's not anything super special. But my monitor was turned vertically, and I love when games offer vertical monitor placement if that is what they're going for. In a vertical shooter, like, yes, give that to me every day of the week. Another game that I played for IndieQuest a couple of years ago was Downwell. Downwell also allows you to turn your monitor vertical, which is very cool. For Downwell, it wasn't as personally useful because you're so focused. For me, I feel like ZeroRanger is like a vertical monitor game. Like, play it that way if at all possible, because it makes so much more sense. It makes you feel like you're in the arcade like it wants you to feel, right? So
that's cool.
Other thing I'll say is there are like anime cutscenes. It's kind of a very anime game in a lot of ways. That goes into a lot of what the story is trying to do as well. But the cutscenes are excellent. Very well presented. Characters are really cool. And then there's a whole heck of a lot of things that I really don't want to say and spoil. But before we get to some of that, more of the story adjacent stuff, music, this soundtrack, I'm just going to come right out and say it might be one of, if not the best OSTs, indie OSTs that I've ever heard in my entire life. It is incredible. It is so good. If anybody out there, after everything I've just said, isn't going to play this game, which I get it, it's a shmup, not everybody's into them, regardless where I put on the quest log, go listen to this soundtrack. It is just chef's kiss, gorgeous, amazing.
I will say I had the exact same feeling about Void Stranger's soundtrack, and it's the same composer because it's the same studio. Just like next level for the genre. In the case of Void Stranger, it's like in kind of like that Game Boy-ish sort of sound palette, and I was like, I cannot believe how good this music is. It is ridiculous. And so I believe you when you say that it is like the top of the top, like the 1% of soundtracks.
I think that's maybe why I compare it to the TG16 a little bit, is because, you know, you could get CD games on TurboGrafx, right? Mm-hmm. And they could have some excellent music, and that's where it's like TurboGrafx back in the early 90s was absolutely blowing the doors off of other systems when it came to music because of the CD quality. And that is probably where I pull, you know, that's where I pulled that system for ZeroRanger. Like, it feels like ZeroRanger would fit right on that console and be a CD game because you know, the amazing TG16 shmups that have amazing soundtracks. Like, it just so good compared. And that's where it's like, you know, you talked about genre defining, Steve, for Void Stranger. I don't know that this is genre defining, because I feel like shmups in general have some of the best soundtracks of all time. That just so much of what you're doing is the music, right? Like, you're so focused on what's going on screen. It better be banging in the background, right? And that's where this game really nails the landing there. It gets jazzy at times. It's so good. It's so good. If you're out there, just go. And I know I don't recommend it. Go play ZeroRanger. I'll say that now. It's going on the quest log at some point, right? If you're not planning on playing it, though, listen to the music. It is just too good. And that composer, we don't always do this, which is on us, but on me personally, because I don't always do this, but their name, I should say, is, I think, Eero Lahtinen. It sounds like a hockey player to me, so I assume it's somewhere over in Eastern Europe or something like that. So, but yeah, very, very good music. All right, on to the story. Not a whole lot I can say here.
I was gonna say, good luck if this is anything like Void Stranger.
It's two parts. Yes, if I said anything about what's going on, it would spoil things for future players. But also, I don't exactly know what's going on all the time. It's one of those, right? Like, where it's like, man, you really have to piece it together. I feel like after I already mentioned I haven't beaten this game. After I actually do beat this game, I'm probably going to have to go and watch some sort of synopsis or read something where it's like, okay, this makes more sense. I will say I 90% get what's going on. But there's that extra 10% is just like, there's loose ends where it's like, how did this happen and why? So in terms of the shoot 'em up genre, most don't have much of a story at all, right? And that's where ZeroRanger does something so totally different. It really incorporates a story, and a very thought-provoking story, into and in between gameplay sections. So it is very worth playing, even if you're not big into shoot 'em ups, but you enjoy a good story in video games, or a story that's going to make you think. Very good for that. Lots of layers sprinkled in here and there. And that's all I really want to say on that front, because it is... Otherwise, I'd be spoiling it for everyone out there, and including the both of you.
I mean, I think the fact that you are laboring on the story section of a shoot 'em up at all is evidence that it's probably worth looking into.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, what's the general story of a shoot 'em up? Oh, Commander, we need you to go rescue, send out the fleet. Oh, you're the last remaining member of said fleet, and we need you to save the world, right? And that's pretty much what you do, and that's almost 90% of every shoot 'em up ever. So yeah, but this does some different things. I'll say it doesn't stray terribly far. You still have to be a pilot of something, right? But there are a lot of different twists and turns. All right, on to what you generally go to a shoot 'em up for, and that is, how does it play? What are you doing? I wouldn't say that it's the most groundbreaking shoot 'em up of all time, but it absolutely nails what it sets out to do. It is an incredible shooter. It's not, I mean, it is like the tightest shooter, one of the tightest shooters I've ever played. It is not, I wouldn't say it's the most bullet hell of bullet hell shooters. There are certain times where it's like, wow, there's a lot of bullets on screen, but I traditionally associate a bullet hell with, I have like 2 or 3 spots on the entire screen that I can put my ship or my character, and it must be in there or else I'm going to die, right? Or I'm going to take a hit. This is not that. This is more like there's bullets that come out in very systematic patterns, and the memorization needs to happen in order to continue to progress, right? So, okay, enemy comes on screen. I've seen this enemy in 3 other tries that I've done. I know how this is going to come out. I know where I need to position myself, or I think I know. Doesn't mean I'm actually going to do it correctly, because ZeroRanger is not for the faint of heart. It is hard. As I think you've said, Steve, Void Stranger is, it's no surprise that this dev just loves to make tough games because ZeroRanger is real tough. It is, and you know, a lot of shoot 'em ups are, but man, this game does not care if you are its friend. That's all I'll say. I mean, you got to be a shmup fan, or, and I'll kind of get to this a little bit more in my verdict a little bit too. You either have to be a shmup fan or you have to have some persistence. I enjoy difficult games, but even I was like, man, this game's hard. This is a hard one to stick to all the time just because of how difficult it is. And if you're not a fan of challenging video games, it might not be for you. But there are some like sort of accessibility stuff that you can get into. Once I have beaten a stage, right? I get to the end. I beat the mini boss and the boss on the way to the end of the stage. And then I make it to stage 2, right? So I was on stage 1, I make it to stage 2. And then I die. I can then go back out, start again from stage 2. And you can select any stage you've ever been to. I will say, without spoiling anything, it is very encouraged by the game that you try to get as far as you can from the beginning. It's one of those.
Yeah. Dude, this is so... I feel like you're talking about Void Stranger.
Really?
It's so wild how consistent this developer is. Like, they've got to move, man. They operate a certain way. It's so cool to hear.
Yeah, just to Steve's reaction. You guys can't see him, but his face just lit up when Seth said that.
I was like, I know exactly what he's talking. Like, I don't know the specifics of what he's talking about, but like, I understand the struggle of having to talk around this type of thing that he's going through right now.
Yeah. There are so many things that I could, and I really have to watch my tongue a little bit because I don't want to accidentally let something slip. I'm going to edit this episode, Josh, so I can edit it out. I just don't want to edit it or spoil it to you guys either because I would love you guys to play this game at some point. But I'll just jump into, what are you doing, right? So you're going and you're shooting enemies. Most enemies just take a few shots to kill. Bosses obviously take a lot more, and they have a health bar. Pixel perfect in a lot of ways. I don't know if anybody out there has played cave shooters. Usually have like a little glowing dot in the middle of your character, so you know they are bullet hell. So you kind of know where you can dodge. I will say I don't know exactly what part of my ship is the part that I need to stay out of bullets or enemies to not get hit. But most of your ship is a solid color, and then there's like green and orange, right? So there is a little portion that is the opposite color. So I should experiment a little bit further and see if that's the part that needs to dodge, because it doesn't seem like your entire ship is not always vulnerable, right? It's a smaller part in the middle. So I assume it's the opposite color, but I haven't done perfect testing on that. I will say it matters certainly, but I'm fairly used to these types of games, and I died a lot. Obviously I had not beaten this game, so it's tough. But it's fair. It's a very fair, it's not artificially difficult. When it comes to damage, you do have you have lives, but then you also kind of have like a health bar for each life. So you have like a couple ticks outside of the number of lives you have left. And those are for making contact with certain enemies. If you make contact with certain enemies, you don't automatically die. So you just lose like a piece of that health. But if you get hit by a projectile, a bullet, a rocket, whatever, something that came out of an enemy craft, that will almost always kill you immediately, right? And then you'll have to go to your next life. So that's kind of how that progression goes between shooting and getting shot at. I already mentioned the level select. Mini bosses. There's almost every stage has a mini boss, and they do not have health, but they die fairly quickly, and it's almost always, how do I figure out how to damage this boss in an effective way? That's how mini bosses usually are. Sometimes they shield themselves at certain times, but in general, you just have to find the opening and then exploit that. Mini bosses are truly mini too. They're almost always about your size, Whereas the big bosses are massive and screen filling, right? And they all have very chunky health bars. And a lot of times they have layered health bars. So they'll have, you'll get through that first health bar and then you have another health bar to go through. And then sometimes you even have another one after that to go through, depending on which section of the game you're in.
Kingdom Hearts style. You love to see it.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I mentioned that the game wants you to, it's pretty clear that the game wants you to go through it in 1cc. I will tell you right now, I'm nowhere near being able to do that. It is brutal. But from what I've been able to tell, you can start at later stages. You actually build up with scores. You actually build up like this continue system. So you start with no continues, and then you can get up to 8 continues, and you can utilize those continues as you like. Even if I jump into a later stage, I still have all 8 of those continues. So you're able to like practice if you're going for the 1cc, or you can, from what I understand, you can beat the game from like starting at the last stage, right? You can. It's a slog, I will say. It's a long stage, but you can beat that stage with all those continues and then actually get credits. But the way you're supposed to do it is start at the beginning and run through the entire game without using a continue at all.
My question was how many. So say I got decently good at this game, how often are you getting extra lives, or do you get extra lives?
Yeah.
Do you just have a life pool, or do you like destroy a certain enemy and then a life falls out, and things like that?
I don't know how the math is, but as you accumulate points, you get lives. It seems like it's like the first 5,000 you get a life, and then maybe it's a little bit like diminishing returns after that, right? So it might be another 10,000 and 20,000 you get a life. But then also, to your point, Josh, enemies every once in a while, or if you do special things, and they will drop an orange. There's a lot of orange theme to this game. And the orange says 1-up. So as long as you drive, or fly, probably, you're a ship. Fly into that 1-up, you get a life, right? So you can get life through points. Cool. You can get life that way. I've accumulated a decent amount of lives. They just fall off really fast. If you I've played through this entire game, and I've replayed stages, and I know what's coming. I'm just warning everyone out there that's interested in this game. I know what's coming the majority of the time now. But man, it's tough. Like, it's really tough to avoid. And something that I wish this game had, something that would make this game nearly perfect in my eyes, is if there was a way to avoid damage when you're about to take it, like a barrel roll that has iframes, or in Gungeon there are such a thing as blanks, right, where you can actually blank away bullets. As far as I can tell, there's none of that. It's just raw dodging. You just have to get in between the bullets, and sometimes even though this isn't necessarily bullet hell, it's super tight. It's super tight sometimes. Yeah. But it's still wonderful, extremely well executed game. There are also shot types. You start out with there are 2 different ships, but you start out with mostly just straight shot, and then you can kind of get different shot types, but you can there's like shot type A, which is your main gun. Then you have shot type B, which you get after the first level. You have a choice of which one you want, right? So one of them, it's not super spoiler heavy. You're going to get there in like 5 minutes. So one of them is like a side shot, and then the other one is a back shot, basically, right? So if you're going to have enemies, or there's going to be enemies coming up from the bottom of the screen, which happens pretty often, then that downward shot might be useful in that situation. Or if enemies are going to be coming on the screen from the sides, then that one's useful. Generally, I always use that one, but there are a lot of instances where I wish I had the downward shot rather than the side shot, but unfortunately you can only have one or the other. And then there's even a third shot type, which I won't get into because that's further into the game. And then other things happen as you play, but don't want to spoil any further than that. So, do you guys have any other questions before I put it on the quest log?
I think it's awesome that there's a shmup that you're bringing into the quest log, for one. For two, one that actually has spoilers. Because usually you're like, yeah, it's a shmup. Yeah. You shoot some stuff. It's pretty cool. Yeah. It's pretty fun. It's a video game with great mechanics, which sounds like this one has. Yes. But there's obviously another layer in of the story, and something that happens that play it and find out, which I love mystery like that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I was already before I even knew you were bringing it, I was already planning on playing this game this year after
Really?
playing Void
Oh,
Stranger
wow.
last year because, I mean, I basically caught whiff that, you know, it's got a certain type of catnip in it that I'm a little bit prone to, that it's got my kind of thing going on, and so that got me pretty jazzed. And so I'm glad that you're bringing it. I still plan on playing it. I still plan on bringing it. Maybe I'll try to line it up with like a second opinion or something, but... Yeah, I'm a little curious. How long then is the 1cc? Do you know? I know that you haven't done it yet, but like, were you to do the 1cc, is this like an hour and a half, or is this like a 30-minute type of playthrough?
So I have looked up them because I've played. I should mention here. I've already said a couple times I haven't technically beaten it, and that is because I'm going to do everything I can to not spoil this. But this might be a huge turnoff for some people. The game is very mean at the end. Very mean. It is very mean. I have seen 99% of what this game offers. I have basically played the entire thing. People might understand what I'm hinting at if you've played other games, especially retro-styled games that do something similar to this. I don't want to give it away, but it's mean. Let's just say I'm playing it still. So I plan on getting the beat. The 1cc, and I've watched some of these people must have put hundreds of hours into this game that can play it as well as they do. It seems like it's around an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. There's some people that I'm watching that are 1ccing this game, but also going for high scores. And they are so ridiculously good. They all they're trying to do is combo. So it's like they put themselves in harm's way intentionally. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. Like they'll leave a mini boss on screen for as long as possible just so they can get as many points off of the breakable projectiles. Like, oh my god, I'm just trying to kill that dude so I can move on. Like it's wild. So
Shooter people are built different, man. I do not understand it.
They are. And I will say, I don't think if anybody that's listening to this is a fan of indies, but also a fan of shmups, I'm sure that you've probably played ZeroRanger because it's in all the communities that I've had to go to try to figure certain things out where it's like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing here or what's wrong with me. Why can't I figure this part out? They're all like glowing praise for this game. If you're an STG fan, as they call it, a shooting game fan. They love it. Best modern shooter. A lot of them have said in Reddit communities from what I've read. So, and I think that leads us right into the verdict of ZeroRanger. I will say this has a massive asterisk, and it's funny because Josh said at the beginning of this episode, main quests are games that you can recommend to anyone, and the majority of people are going to enjoy them. Side quests are games that are either maybe not quite as good as a main quest, or have a caveat. I have a huge asterisk, a huge caveat on ZeroRanger. I've already mentioned it. It's tough as nails. It will beat you down, and it will make you sad. I promise you it will do all those things, but it is still a main quest game. It must be a main quest because it is just, of its genre, especially modern, I've played a decent amount. I'm not a shmup guy by any means, but I've played a decent amount of them, and I enjoy them. It is one of the best ever made, and I cannot put it on the side quest because of that. Also, while it is very hard, the fact that you can level select, I think, helps it out a lot. But just know going in that you might end up finishing something and be disappointed after. And I'm sorry that that's going to happen to you. Don't look it up. Don't look it up. Do whatever you can. Do the best you can. And move forward. But just know that it's going to hurt at certain points. And that's all I have to say.
I'm nodding along like I've played. I'm like agreeing with you, and I've never even played the game. I'm like, yeah, darn right.
Yeah. Not spoiler, not super spoiler. Like obviously, there's a final boss, right? I have fought that final boss. Oh my goodness. Holy moly, that boss is hard. That boss is so hard. And as I'm playing through it and finally get to the point where it's like, okay, I did it. I think I did it. It's just like I'm thinking, how can anyone want to see this game? Insane. But I went into this game with the full intention of putting it in that bingo square. That is 1cc a shmup for Polykill, as we mentioned earlier. So we'll see. I am still on that road, and I hope to be able to do it. But it literally might. I'm glad I started in January. It might take me till December to get it. So
I cannot wait to hear about it. Let me know.
That is ZeroRanger on the main quest.
That's awesome. I love a game that you're like, hey, there's a caveat, but screw the caveat. You still got to play this thing. That's awesome.
There are, our buddy, our pal, Mr. Mo, loves roguelites, right? And there's certain roguelites that he's like, oh, that should be a main quest game, or Gungeon should be a main quest game. And I tend to agree in terms of like, yeah, Gungeon's a 10 out of 10 game, but it's so hard that I can't recommend it to everybody. ZeroRanger is a similar way, but to me, it's like, it is just absolutely incredible, and there's at least some accessibility, so that helps it. So,
yeah,
beautiful
awesome
thing. It's a good day for the quest log, man. I feel like my particular tastes are really being satisfied today.
Right.
And it's going to only continue because I'm bringing my own game. What do you know? All right. I'll ask, do either of you know what game I'm bringing? I bet Seth does. He's a little bit more of like the sleuth on Steam, so I don't try to hide it.
Oh, I might know what it is based on that. I will take a guess if you like.
Go for it.
I can't, and I should have just pulled Steam up as you're talking. Something to do with like some family, like trees, getting on a computer. Is that it?
All right. He crushed it. I don't even need to describe the game anymore. I can just put it on the quest log. Yes. So I'm bringing The Roottrees Are Dead is the name of the game. Other than Seth obviously has not heard of this game, other than like maybe clicking into the Steam page or something, but have either of you had any experience or seen this game before?
So funny enough, Steve, I had just, I always check friend activity to see what people are playing, people are recommending, and had seen that you had started this game. And I'm like, oh, have I heard of that game? And I clicked into it and I'm like, I have. I was looking at that game within the last, week before you had played it. I'm like, would that be something I want to play? Because, sometimes you get lucky to come out at the very beginning of the year and be an indie game. Mm-hmm. And, and I'm going to look at those games. Good job coming out in January of 2025. I like to play 2025 games now, and you're in that category. So, yeah, but that's where I saw it.
I saw it through one of the YouTubers I watched. It's Clemmy. He does like best indie games or whatever on YouTube. I think it's best indie games. It was on one of his lists. That's where I saw it, but that's it. Just very surface level.
Clemmy heard about it from me. I don't know who Clemmy is. But... No, I think it's a relatively popular game. But so The Roottrees Are Dead, developed by Robin Ward. As Drachma mentioned, it came out 10 days ago as when we're recording this. Came out January 15th, 2025. That has like a little bit of an asterisk to it because this game was originally developed for the Global Game Jam, which is not something I was familiar with prior to researching this game a little bit, but I guess it's a relatively well-known annual or semi-annual game jam, and it was developed initially for that in 2023, but obviously it was not as robust as this version. It was free. I think they said that a lot of the art was AI just to like get art there in the couple of weeks that they had for the game jam. So it was just available on itch since 2023 for free, and now they've basically like turned it into the game they wanted to release and actually released it as a product that you pay for on Steam.
I would consider that almost like early access adjacent. So
basically, yeah, when you go to the itch page, they say like, we're keeping this up, for historical context and record. We want this build to be available to everyone. But in like giant red text, they say, this is not the game to play. Do not play the itch version. Please go play the Steam version. So I would consider this a 2025 release, even though it's got a little bit of a history there. So The Roottrees Are Dead is a deductive mystery puzzle adventure game. They are very upfront with their influence, so I won't beat around the bush. This is a game 100% following in the lineage of Return of the Obra Dinn. So they took Return of the Obra Dinn and they've basically added in like a little bit of like Hypnospace Outlaw or Her Story, a little bit of like you're clicking around an old like Windows 95 PC energy to it. So setup for the game and kind of the loose story is, I don't even know your character has a name. You're first person, your character is irrelevant to the story, but you are basically like a genealogist. And this mysterious person comes to you shortly after the death of this very famous family called the Roottrees. So Carl Roottree, his wife, and his daughters have all died in a plane crash. And Carl was the president of this Roottree, basically like this candy empire. He was the CEO, worth a whole bunch of money. And his daughters were successful models. This is just people that come from money. And this person comes to you and basically says, this family, not starting with Carl, but going back multiple generations, this family basically has a will, a trust set up so that the profits of this very successful company feed into all of the blood relatives of the Roottrees. So anyone that is a blood relative in this family is owed money as a result of this trust, as a result of this will. And so they come to you and they're like, we need you to figure out who all these people are. So you have this giant cork board with a bunch of question mark empty slots. It shows you all the connections, like it shows you like all the children of everybody else, and it shows you how they all relate, but you don't have any information on those people, and it's your job to figure out who those people were, who are the Roottrees, etc. So
I want to mention that when I initially saw this game, and my mind is much more open now than it was prior to this podcast, 10 years ago, whatever you want to say, right? 10 years ago, I would look at this game and be like, yeah, not for me, right? Mm-hmm. Because of what it is. But nowadays, I would absolutely play this. It reminds me a lot of like, we got one recently for the boys, but like you can get these, and Josh, you can probably talk to this too, because you play a lot of board games, but I feel like there's like these new board games that you can buy where you're like trying to, it's almost like Clue, but you're trying to solve things together type of deal, right? And it's like a party game, and that's what it reminds me of, but in like video game form a little bit, right?
Yeah,
where you're trying to solve the mystery.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's a ton of them. I'm looking at one right here. It's like New York City emergency room. I have a bunch of them around here, Yeah. So I agree with that. It's like that, but with like like Steve was saying, Windows 95 interface for some of the stuff, just from looking at the trailers, which is pretty unique and cool.
Yeah, it's a fun twist on the Obra Dinn formula, which Obra Dinn was much more, you're walking around in various scenes trying to figure things out. This is very much you're clicking through websites and things like that, but we'll get into that in a minute. So you have this giant corkboard of all these relatives going back like 5 generations or something like that, and you have to figure out who all these people are. Specifically, you need to figure out their name, their occupation, and what they look like, so a photo of them, and you need to put all 3 of those onto their slot on the family tree, and you need to fill out the family tree. It operates on the same model as the Obra Dinn does, which I love so much, which is the game confirms for you that you're correct after you have 3 people fully filled in. So once you have the correct photo, name, and occupation for 3 different people, it will lock all 3 of them in. So it prevents you from just like guessing on one person to, like trying to figure out, you have 2 of the details and you're just guessing on the third, because you won't be able to guess on the third detail unless you already have 2 other people that you're 100% confident and 100% correct about.
And odds of doing that for 3 people is insane, right? You're not going to be able to just keep slot. I mean, you could. It would take you forever and it would be very boring. So like that's very smart of the game.
was gonna say, it reminds me of Chance of Sonar, where you have like the multiple things you gotta do, but it's like you have to lock in the 5 or whatever it was on that one to like lock in that page. So it's a similar element or design idea.
Yeah, and the game gives you a list of all of the names that you'll use, and it'll give you a list of all the occupations that you'll use. And I think the occupations has some red herrings in there that never show up on the tree. I do think all the names show up on the tree, but you also can optionally place like spouses of people on the tree that are not blood relatives. There's like a little slot to just put their name there. And so between the blood relatives and the spouses, there's like 100 names. And so, if you have like a potential of like 10 different photos, 100 names to choose from, and then like 50 occupations, do the math of whatever 10 times 100 times 50 times 3 is to have all the potential. You just can't guess. It's just not possible.
No.
Now, every now and again, I will be really confident on 2 people, and I'll be confident I have the right photo and the right name, but maybe I had another occupation. Sometimes you do a little guessing in there when the circumstances dictate. But the game understands you're going to do that, and especially for some of like the last relatives you'll feel, and they actually kind of expect you to do a little bit of like, we didn't give you the information about this person, but you can, through deduction and like elimination of other options, figure out who they are, even though you didn't actually learn anything about them, which is cool. So the way you're actually learning information and locking in for these different people is, like I mentioned, you're digging through web archives. So the game starts out and it gives you a couple pieces of evidence that you're looking at, one of which is a list of notable Roottrees. These are like Roottrees, like Carl Roottree, who's the current CEO that just died. They're Roottrees that basically are famous enough to show up in a Google search. So they're like, these 6 people, for whatever reason, one of them, without spoiling too much, one of them is a famous author. So it's like their name is on the internet. And so they say, start by looking at these people. It's probably going to be very easy to figure out who these people are, what they look like, what their job was, because you can just look them up on the internet. But as you search them on this in-game fake search engine, you'll start pulling up websites or articles of those different people, and they'll often like reference other things. They'll maybe reference other people in the family, or they'll reference events or places or whatever it might be. And then you can key off of those to do your own separate searches, and you kind of like leap from page to page to page, finding new things to search for and key off of and dig a little bit deeper as you go along. You also, in addition to this like in-engine Google search, you also have access to like the internet library system. So if you ever find, again, for the example of the author that they give you, if you find the name of a book and the author of the book, you can search that in this public library database and pull up some information about that book. And there's like a periodical, it's like an online magazine lookup that you can look up articles from newspapers or magazines or tabloids or whatever it might be. And so between those main things, that's all the places that you're digging for info.
I always wonder this in these types of games. Can you search like dumb stuff that has nothing to do with anything? Did you ever try to do that?
Okay, you can't just search like spacecrafts and just read about spacecrafts. There are a couple of like dead ends, dumb red herrings, just like silly things. Okay. And there's a couple like intentionally fun side tangents that you look up that are not, they don't serve you solving the ultimate mystery, but there is like a way to like unlock like a fun little computer game that you'll play on the computer and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're not looking at Hypnospace Outlaw where you're watching Chowderman music videos or anything like that.
No. In fact, I will point out to people, because I don't want to give people the wrong impression. I compare it to Hypnospace Outlaw because you're like jumping around on websites and stuff. But Hypnospace Outlaw is about the experience of like the GeoCities Angel Fire internet, right? Mm-hmm. And this is not, it doesn't have that much reverence. This is much more utilitarian. In fact, you're not actually even necessarily pulling up like different unique websites. When you do a Google search, you're really getting like a summary of that topic as a search result. And sometimes at the bottom, your character will actually add their own thoughts and insight as like the last paragraph of that search. So if I let's say that I look up one of the Roottrees and they tell me that they, went to this particular famous barber. I might look up that barber shop in this Google and it'll tell me a little bit of information about it. And at the bottom, if that is like not going to be really relevant to you, there will often be like a little thought bubble that your character has that's like, no, this is interesting to read, but I don't think it has any further connection to the Roottrees. So the game stops you from like going too deep down the wrong rabbit holes, basically.
That's nice. Yeah.
And as you do different searches, a lot of times you're trying to learn information about these people, obviously, but a lot of times what you're really trying to do is get to a photo of them, because that's the only thing you're not given up front at the start of the game is photos of people. And so you'll have to like get creative in a lot of ways in terms of how you might find photos of people. So you'll end up looking up stuff like, maybe they happen to be in a relatively mundane, unimportant newspaper article that you just happen to learn about. So that's the only way you can actually find a photo of their face to put on this timeline. Or maybe you learn someone's a musician, and so you're looking up the liner notes and cover art of their CD that they released just to try to get a mugshot of them or something like that. So things like that.
You're completely confined to this room, right? So everything you need is right here.
Yep, you're just in one single room, and you basically can hop between your evidence table, which is where you have the evidence that the game gives you, and as you like correctly identify more of the relatives, the game will kind of like seed you new evidence that will help you with some of the ones you don't have yet. So you have the evidence table to look at the evidence that you have. Then you have the actual family tree board, and you have the computer that you can click on, and then a couple other little like fun things. And so you can't even walk around the room. Again, it's just first person point and click. And all of the things I mentioned are just accessible via buttons at the bottom of the screen. You can click at any point, so there's really no reason to look at the room. It is much more like just click heavy, research heavy type of game. So I love this type of thing. That moment when the game locks in 3 people you got correct is so satisfying, because it like you like click that last name and you're like, I think this is it, and suddenly it goes whoosh, and it pulls up this black screen and plays this little fun music, and it says, well done, here's the people you got correct. Boom, boom, boom. And then it'll show you, here's all the like incidental characters like spouses and stuff that aren't necessary to beat the game but help. Here's all the little side stuff you locked in correctly too. Ding, 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 ding. There's a little button that says booyah. You click the booyah button. It's just nice. It just satisfies the dopamine centers in your brain. It's just them tossing you some treats, being like, attaboy, way to go, buddy. You did so good. I will say the game has multiple systems to keep you on the right track, and I think a lot of good systems to keep you focused on the right stuff. So there's 2 that really help a lot. One is it has a very good hint system. It has the type of hint system you want any good adventure game or mystery game to have, which is layered hints that get increasingly more specific. So at any point you're stuck, if you don't know what to look up, you're like, I kind of feel like I've run into dead ends. I don't know what I've missed. There's a little like rubber ducky icon you can click on. I don't know why it's a duck. It's just a duck. And you can say, I need a hint. You click that and it'll give you a very vague hint. It'll be like, oh, it looks like, you've identified Carl's wife, and yet you haven't figured anything about her kids. There's probably information about the kids somewhere in roughly the same area. And then if you didn't figure any of that out, then you can click like, I need another hint, and it will give you a second hint in that same line that's like, I'm pretty sure there was an article that said that Carl's daughters attended prom at this high school. And then if you click, I need another hint, it'll say, try searching, Everpine High School. And then it'll just get so specific to where they're essentially handing you the hint or the answer if you go that deep.
Is there, first of all, I guess, does this game have achievements?
It does have achievements. If this is your question, I don't know if there's an achievement for going completely hint-free.
Hintless?
Okay. I did not. If it is, it's a secret achievement, and I didn't look it up. I definitely use some hints at the end, because you will reach a point in this game where you have especially I think in the later half of the game, where you have like 40 pieces of evidence and you've looked through like maybe 100 web pages at this point. Like you've done a lot of research, and just in that process, you've probably overlooked a couple of things. And so I needed towards the end the hint system to help me close the loop on a couple people that I actually had like kind of started down their path, but then got distracted by something else and forgot where I was going at that point. Because a lot of times you'll pull up a page and there will immediately be like 3 or 4 things that you're like, you want to look up instantly. And so sometimes you get down one rabbit hole too far, you forget where you started and what you were doing. I will say that the game, this is not one of the 2 systems I was talking about, but is worth mentioning. The game has a really nice journal system that could help you avoid that. I just didn't use it very effectively personally. You have just a journal that you can write any notes in that you want to with like 15 different tabs. So you can make tabs for different people and write all the notes you've learned about them, different families, whatever it might be. And you can just jot down anything you learn, or any text in the game you can drag over and click highlight, and it will just copy that blurb of text into your journal. And so if there's like a paragraph that you want to remember for later, but you're going to search something unrelated to that paragraph, you can highlight it, throw it in your journal as like a to-do, and then go down your other path. And then when you're done with that, look in your journal for the next steps. So there is a good way to document all the stuff that you found, which is really nice. The other system that helps with getting stuck is kind of the inverse of that. You know, those are systems that help you if you have like information overload, but if you're not sure where to go, every piece of evidence is tagged with a number that the game calls intuition, which is basically from what it amounts to is, from this piece of evidence, here's how many lines of research you haven't found that you could go down. Basically, here's how many undiscovered relevant pages, articles, newspapers, whatever, that you have enough information from this piece of evidence to find that you haven't yet. And so sometimes you'll have like a piece of evidence that has like the number is like 8. And you're like, so there's just so much information here that I haven't dug into yet. I really should be focusing on this one for a while.
Yeah.
That type of thing. And it keeps you on the right path, which is really nice. So, yeah, questions on how the game operates.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. The question I was going to have for you as you were talking, and I know you, in a lot of these types of games, you like to do this. How many notebook papers do you have filled out for this game? Because you had mentioned like, oh, I gleaned this bit of information, but there was like 4 pieces of information, and I followed this trail, and then I had like backtrack. So were you taking notes to try to keep track of all that? Is this a note taker's game, I guess is my question.
Very much a note taker's game, although I used the in-game journal for all of it. So I never had any handwritten notes, but I filled I think a single tab on the notebook is actually like essentially infinite in how far down you can go. But I used all 15 of those tabs. They were earmarked. You know, I had ones for specific families, specific people, specific events or terms that have a lot of information around them. I had ones that were just like general, like unsolved, like things that I felt were unsolved or not solved to my satisfaction yet. So yeah, I was note crazy in this game. And it's nice because the game lets you pull up the journal on like the left third of the screen and keep the rest of the screen open and clickable. And so you can like pull up your notes and keep searching on like the in-game Netscape navigator and find what you're looking for. So
they're like, we know you guys are sickos. Here's your journal.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah. This is for the jotting it down perverts. Enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't go into the story too much. There is definitely a story and it's interesting. I will say it is pretty grounded, like compared to Obra Dinn, without spoiling either story. Now, Obra Dinn was a pretty fantastical story, like took some interesting swerves. This definitely takes some swerves, but it's more like a detective mystery novel. Like, you're still grounded in the real world, and like
Right.
you're not going to learn 2/3 of the way through the game that the Roottrees were like a secret family of vampires or anything like that. Like
Right.
they are a successful business family, and you are peeling apart the lives of the people within them. There is drama and tension between those people that you learn about, but like in that regard, what you see is what you get. It is what's on the tin. You are doing that role to that end, which I think for some people might be a little disappointing. You know, some people are like waiting for that crazy swerve, which just doesn't quite show up here.
I could see the, 60 Minutes people out there, that love a good murder mystery, right? Like, they watch all the murder mystery television shows, right? Dateline and stuff like that. They love to you're sitting on your couch trying to figure it out, obviously it's going to tell you at the end, right?
Yeah.
But this just gives them a way to really itch that scratch that they have, right? Where they can actually go and figure it out themselves.
Yeah. And it's interesting the way the story's laid out, because, I set up the premise of Carl and his family died in this plane crash at the beginning, but you actually fill out his portion of the family tree pretty much immediately, because, again, he's all over the news. He's everywhere. It's very easy to find information on him and his family. You don't even know at the start of the game to what end you're doing this. You don't even know what the story is, or if there is any mystery for you to solve. There is, but like, you don't know what that is until well into the game. It's just, the momentum is just the satisfaction of solving these people, knocking down the guess who tiles and
yeah, right,
seeing it light up and fill in as you play it. I think that the rest of the game, like, sometimes in games we'll break down like each individual component. Realistically, visually, it's very utilitarian. Like, it just kind of serves the need. Soundtrack wise, it just kind of is what it is. It literally uses like public domain, fair use music and pops it up. So I don't think that they put too much focus on that part of the game. So I won't put too much focus on it. I will say that the art for the different like magazine renderings and things that you'll find as evidence and pictures of people, that's all very well done. So they're definitely talented, but it's not a super unique game visually, and the soundtrack just kind of is what it is. I ended up turning the soundtrack down a little bit just to help me think more.
Yeah.
I left it up in the background because it's got a little bit of detective-y kind of like saxophone in there, but it wasn't the focal point. And I will say is that if you do play this game and you like the game, when you finish the game, you unlock kind of like the game's own sequel in a way. I don't want to give too much away, but like, you finish the game and you unlock basically more The Roottrees Are Dead in a really interesting way that is very narratively appropriate, which I liked a lot. So
yeah,
I got
cool.
like a third of the way into that extra content, and we'll probably go back and finish that up just because it's so much fun. But yeah, final questions before I place it on the quest log.
About how long is the game without me pushing in HLTV in this Google document that's in front of me?
It's about 65 hours. I'd say
65?
7. No.
Yeah.
It's about a Metaphor ReFantasio's worth of game.
Yeah.
No, it's it's a little tricky because games like this can vary based on like how quickly you solve puzzles. I would say most people are going to solve it in the range of like 6 to 10 hours or so.
Okay.
I think I was rated around 10 hours, and I was kind of a little pokey, a little bit of a dunce, and I was playing it in the mornings after I dropped my kid off at daycare. So like 7:30 in the morning, I'm not at my brightest, most detective-iest mental state. But yeah, not too long of a game at all, and it's
Nice.
got a good pace.
I think something that I love about this game is it really puts into perspective how difficult it would actually be to be a real detective, because all the things that you've said, like, the game is trying to lead you in the right direction in a lot of instances. It's almost giving things on a silver platter if you're asking for them. Even lining up 3 answers, right? It's going to tell you got it right. Real detective doesn't have any of that. Like, you have to actually line it all up and be right, or else your job's kind of on the line at that point. You need to actually be good at it, right? Yep. So that's the point. Like, if games were that way, none of us would actually probably play them, because it's just I'm not an actual detective in real life, but I can appreciate the job that goes into doing something like that because of a game like this.
Yes. Yeah. Very difficult. And the number of like tiny little observations you need to make, like little dumb threads you need to follow, just hoping it leads to a shred of information, it's interesting to see. So then it ultimately brings us down to where are we going to put it on the quest log? And fellas, I know that I've been saying this a lot lately, but it's true. This one was hard. Like, this is the type of game that really, for me, teetered, like, right in that middle ground. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that, for me, was I don't think we have Obra Dinn on the quest log yet.
We don't.
And
That's
this
a
is
very notable omission, right?
Yeah. This is so much a game that has reverence for Obra Dinn and is definitely doing its own thing, but like loves Obra Dinn. And so I'm like, well, I know where I would put Obra Dinn, spoilers, and so maybe I shouldn't put this game alongside it. And I'm like, well, ultimately that's not fair, because you just take the game for what the game is on its own merits. And I think different people have different experiences with it. But for me, I think it's a main quest. I think it barely lands in the main quest space. It is, in that sort of classic definition of a main quest, a game that pretty much anyone can get into. It's mechanically simple, lots of good systems to help you out when you get stuck. It's subject material everyone can be interested in. And whether or not you're a fan of Obra Dinn or not, if you've played Obra Dinn, I'm very happy to tell you that there's another game like it. And if you've never played Obra Dinn, this is going to hit that much harder for you, because you're going to be like, oh my God, this is so good.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. In some ways, it's kind of like the Garoon to Outer Wilds in that way, where it's borrowing systems of a Titan that came before. Not a perfect metaphor, but kind of. So in the end, I think we're going to place The Roottrees Are Dead on the main quest, a game I quite enjoyed. For the 4 days I was playing it, it had its hooks in me. It was that type of game where I was like, all right, we got to get this kid to daycare. Let's go. I'm racing home and running down to my computer and booting it up instantly and be like, all right, I can get an hour and 20 minutes in. Let's go. And maybe I spilled a little into the start of the workday once or twice, because if I was on a hot train, I'll say.
Hey man, that's why I have a work laptop. I've got a fun laptop and a work laptop, and technically I can just have them both on at the same time, and no one needs to know it.
If I'm managing my email and I have a meeting coming up here in 20 minutes, and I'm responding to any issues that crop up, maybe I squeeze 20 more minutes of game over here.
Yeah, that's right.
While I'm on a hot streak of clues. Who's to say what happens in life?
I kind of, last little comment. I mean, I think a lot of our listeners know, but Steve's last thing that he goes to play games on is PC, because it's not, you've mentioned it, right? It's not great for your lifestyle, the family, and all that, right? It's not in a good place. So hearing that you were excited to get down there, that's an extra little bit on top for anybody out there. Like, this, clearly a fun time.
Yeah. I was glued to the computer. And I don't remember if I said this up top, but it is a PC-only game. As of right now, it's only available on PC.
And it doesn't seem like it would be one that would translate well to moving a pointer with the analog stick or typing in notes with an on-screen keyboard or anything like that. No, it wouldn't work.
It'd be pretty brutal, because you are typing a lot.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's run down the games. We had 1,000 Times Resist, main quest, ZeroRanger, a main quest, and The Roottrees Are Dead as a main quest. 3 main quests today, boys. Hell yeah.
Nice. We've been doing that a lot lately. I guess twice lately. It's the live episode and then now. So don't worry. There's still side quests out there. They're coming.
Was the last regular episode the live episode? Is that true?
No, we had one. Okay. The only reason I know
that feels
this
like forever.
I've got all my notes stacked on top of each other, and they're mostly in order. And the last proper notes that I wrote was for Victory Heat Rally.
Oh, okay.
So it was, I think, early December or something like that. We did a normal episode.
All right.
Almost,
so
but
not quite.
Yeah.
So one thing we've been getting a lot is community comments and concerns and questions and various community things, which is awesome. We really appreciate that. So I threw this out there. I was like, why don't we just make this like a segment that we can revisit and visit as things come in? And we're going to call that segment the Campfire Chat. So if you guys want to submit any comments, topics of discussion, anything about the show that you guys want us to talk about, send us an email at IndieQuestPod@gmail.com or send us a DM on Blue Sky, IndieQuestPod, or hit me up on DMs, whatever you want to do. And we'll read some stuff on the show like we've been doing, but now it's under this new header, and we all have our marshmallows out, roasting it around the Campfire Chat here. Oh, before we get into it, how do you guys like your marshmallows? Do you like to get like a nice char on the outside? Do you like it golden brown? How do you do if you're going to do that, you know?
I know people who love to just burn the crap out of them and then either eat it that way or like peel the blackness off and then eat, so you're not getting the carcinogens into your body, and just eat the melty goo that is left behind. It takes a little bit longer to do it this way, but I would prefer to just hover it over the fire, get it a little brown, give it a good 2 minutes over the fire of rotating. That's the perfect marshmallow for me.
I respect that. I'm the opposite of you, though. I'm a man of extremes. I either throw that thing over the fire for 10 seconds, just enough to warm it up and maybe get a teeny bit of brown on one side, and then it's going right in my mouth. Or I just throw the whole pretense away and I just shove that thing in the flame, pull it out, blow it off, and eat the whole charred chunk. I don't mind a bit, so it's all good.
Yeah, I'm probably in between you guys. I like to be a little methodical, and then I'll take that brown shell off and eat it, and then I'll do it again a couple times, you know? Kind of like get that layer, you know? Like the jawbreaker, getting to the inner layers. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Well, I'll read the first one here from our buddy Max, Poto Max. He says, so, IndieQuest folks, and I think this was maybe it was a comment on Discord. I grabbed it from somewhere and threw it in here. But anyway, he says, so, IndieQuest folks, I guess you want to hear my obscure shit, Mount Rushmore. Here you go. He says, Flippin' Dead, awesome arcade game from Juicy Beast, my favorite indie dev out there. Boom. A weird-ass Bomberman/Doom unofficial crossover with awesome music. Beast Quest, my favorite mobile game, a mix between WoW and Punch-Out. Okay. Mario PC Fun 2, another weird-ass game, a German RPG Mario Maker game. It's absolutely terrible. I love it. Made me start making games.
It's very Potomax list in that I've heard of none of these, I don't think. I also don't understand how a game can be a WoW Punch-Out mix. Those seem like they should cancel each other out in some way. That doesn't seem real.
Bomberman Doom crossover sounds fun. I'd play that.
It does.
Honestly, I'm up for any crazy genre mashup, so I might have to check out Beast Quest. It sounds just weird enough that I want to check that thing out. So, cool list, Poto.
Very much. I can read the next one here. We got one from our buddy Go Hobo Go. It says, Go Hobo Go here. I'd love to hear 3 games each of you guys played with the intent of bringing to IndieQuest that didn't live up to your expectations. And I don't know about you guys. I'm going to interpret that as 1 from each of us, 3 total. I don't know that I have 3 personally to share. I have a bit of a reputation of just liking everything I play, so it's pretty uncommon actually that I play something and it doesn't live up to at least a side quest in my mind. So I'll have to noodle on this for a sec. Maybe if either of you guys have one off the top of your head, or off of your notes because you came more prepared than me, I'd be curious to hear what that is.
I came negative prepared. I remember Josh throwing this in our chat, and I was like, that's interesting. And then I was like, I'll look into that. And then I forgot until now. So here we are.
I think I already wrote mine at one point and said it. The ones I was that was kind of like, go ahead though. Sorry.
I do have a game. Okay. I played this game for our Bargain Quest episode, but I was like noodling between a few games and just trying to find something. And that's what's kind of fun about Bargain Quest, because most of those games are fairly unknown, right? So we're kind of going into them with completely fresh eyes. and there's no reviews or hardly any, right? So I played a little game called Froggo's Adventure Verdant Venture, which is a Kirby style game. And it's like almost so Kirby that it's like, oh, this is just Kirby, but you're playing as a frog instead. I mean, there's some different mechanics, right? You're not able to do certain things Kirby can do and vice versa. I just felt that it was such a ripoff that it's still fine, but such a ripoff that I didn't feel like I wanted to bring it, because it was almost like, well, if I talk about a game like that, I'm going to make so many comparisons, and that's just not fun for a lot of listeners, I don't think. Like, this is like Kirby, and that's like Kirby, and then this is like Kirby, and everybody listens like, okay, so it's like Kirby, you know? Mm-hmm. So I didn't bring it. Is it side quest worthy? It would have teetered for me. It's fun, certainly, but there was reasons I didn't bring it to the quest log at all, and it was mostly because I thought Circle Hitter Ball at Hell was a much better, more unique game at the time. And so, yeah, that would be my answer for that question. Go, Hobo, go.
That makes sense, yeah. I will say it's worth mentioning, too, that games don't, at least for me, they don't slot into just 3 buckets. It's not main quest, side quest, like bad game as the third bucket. Sometimes there's just a good reason you didn't bring something, either, like Seth just said, maybe it felt a little redundant, or maybe I played 2 games in the same time period, and one of them, I kind of like just in my heart knew this is pretty side questy, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just not that enthusiastic about this one compared to this other game that I felt like is a main quest, which I think is part of why the show inadvertently leans a little main quest heavier, because if you play a main quest and a side quest in the same week, you're going to have more passion. You're going to bring the main quest up for discussion, and so it ends up filtering to kind of more like a 60-40 balance in the end.
Right. That's a really fantastic point, Steve, on like the whole main quest versus side quest thing. Like, I don't want to come here, like, every once in a while I want to play a side quest game or something I think it's going to be on side quest, because we need to round out that list. But inevitably we're going to be less excited about that game, right? Mm-hmm, and we want to come here with energy. Like, we're content creators, right? Like, that's what we're trying to do, and we want it to be enjoyable for the listener. So that's part of it, right? If anybody out there's like, oh, there's way too many main quest games, like, yeah, we're going to do what we can, right? But we want to talk about games that excite us too, because it's more exciting for each of us to talk to each other about, and hopefully it's more exciting for the listener.
Yeah,
that's true.
My favorite discussions to have with the two of you are ones where there's no doubt in my mind you're going to put this on the side quest when you're done, because I'm just along for the ride. I'm like, the main quest when you're done, because I just can't wait.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Josh, I have one. Do you have one for you?
You go ahead. I'm actually looking up one that I played, and I'm just trying to remember the name of it, and it's bothering me. So I'll find it, and you can throw yours on there.
So I pulled one out that I'm pretty sure I should fact check myself here before I actually say it. I'd hate to be like, I didn't feel like this game was worth bringing to the side quest, and it is on the side quest. Like,
right.
Whoops. Well, it's maybe lower on the side quest than it otherwise should have been.
Yeah, exactly.
A game that I played, I finished it last year. I'd never finished it before, but I had played it a couple years before then. It's called Minute of Islands. And I got grabbed by this because it's got just this incredible art style. Like, just visually phenomenal. Looks so good. It's got like a little bit of like an Adventure Time energy and a little like storybook energy. It's just a fun looking game. The actual experience of playing it is it's a pretty slow, I guess you'd call it like a point and click adventure. You're not pointing and clicking, you're controlling the character, but you're just like getting items and pulling levers and bringing them to people. And the story was a little slow for my tastes. The gameplay felt very slow for my tastes. It was the type of game that, I mean, as evidenced by the fact that I played it, it took me, 2 playthroughs or 2 play sessions across multiple years. I was kind of dragging myself through a little bit, and it just never got its hooks into me. So I didn't end up bringing that one because outside of praising the art style, I felt like I would have been kind of very lukewarm describing everything else, and there wouldn't have been a lot of enthusiasm behind it. I could see why. I think for a lot of people it maybe would be a side quest, but for me it just didn't get me going.
I've got one more for you, Steve, and I feel like if I didn't point it out to you, You would be mad if I said it after the episode. So another one that I assume would be this way for you, it might be the Plucky Squire.
Great. Yes. Great pick. Yes. Plucky Squire, a victim of its own, of my expectations, I guess. I don't know. That one really was one of the biggest letdowns for me. Fun fact about the Plucky Squire. Did you guys see they just released a big patch to the Plucky Squire that includes a mode where they took out a lot of the dialogue. It's called like streamlined mode, and they basically took the feedback that I had and that a lot of other people had that it's just too chatty, and they cut out like a whole bunch of the dialogue and the unnecessary like obvious hints and stuff to make the game to actually let you play the game more, which I bet if I played that mode first, it maybe would have shown up on one of these two.
Wouldn't that be so frustrating for the person who was in charge of creating all that dialogue to be like, yeah, I'm sorry, man. We got to cut all this out. You like that would just suck. You poured all this time into it. It reminds me of having a project at work where we're planning on doing this thing in like 2027, and then halfway through 2026 it gets canceled. But I spent all this time doing it. Like that, it sucks so much. It's just such a terrible feeling. So bummer for that guy. L for that guy. Sorry, buddy.
Heart goes out to you.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, like I kind of have mixed feelings about stuff like that. There's another game that had something similar. I can't remember the game, so this is entirely unhelpful. But there's another game where a bunch of feedback came out from like players and reviews and stuff, and they made a change to the game that like satisfied that criticism, but to me felt like it sort of fundamentally changed the game they originally intended to make. And so when I saw that patch for the Plucky Squire, I'm like, that's cool, but I almost feel bad. I feel like you guys are having to change the game you were excited about to satisfy all this criticism. Like I would almost rather that they just, take that to heart, and then in their next game that they develop, adjust based on that feedback, rather than like trying to, after the fact, like re-engineer their game into something that people wanted it to be. It's kind of weird.
So I was looking for this game this whole time. I logged into my Epic Game Store. I logged into my Steam. I cannot find the name of this game. Do you guys know this? Like, it's like a janky 3D platformer that's Halloween themed. It's not Pumpkin Jack. It's like it has like a little baby on the cover. Oh my god, the name is slipping me so hard. But okay, anyway, I tried this game out. I played it for like 5 hours or something on Steam Deck and over the course of the week to try to bring it to the show. And the game was just technically too janky to bring to Questlog. That was the first time I've ever encountered that. But the game itself was actually not bad if you're into like just kind of like janky and quirky 3D platformers. But I was like, I'm not going to bring a game that's kind of broken to the Questlog, But I can't think of the name of it.
It's not Corn Kids 64, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's something like that though. Like, it's like it's adjacent to Pumpkin Jack. Oh well, I'll eventually think of it, and then might have to bring it back up. But yeah.
I'm glad it's not Corn Kids 64 because I've got that sitting in my library and I've been very interested in starting that. I was like, please don't let it be that one.
It's not that.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
It's not
good.
that one.
Awesome. Seth, you want to take the next one?
I said one.
The next Campfire Chat.
Oh, next. I was like, are we going?
I'm just forcing you to keep
listing
listing games you don't love. Just keep going.
Just keep shitting on every indie dev we've ever known. Yeah. All right. So last one here is from our pal, Robert Ring, also known as King Octavius in our Discord. What's going on, Rob? So Rob says, title of this email is Late Mount Rushmore. He says, hey guys, I'm not sure how I missed the call for indie Mount Rushmores, but here is mine. FTL, Dear Esther, Braid, and Brogue. You may be wondering about Brogue. While I do not consider myself a hardcore roguelite fan, this game is generally known only among hardcore roguelike fans, and it is somewhat famous in that community. I won't go on about it, but it is what I call a true roguelike. A roguelike in ASCII with turn-based gameplay. Before I played it, I thought the title is a pun on bro, but it actually has no comedic punny elements. It is simply a play on the creator's name, Brian. Brian plus rogue equals brogue. Also, you can only find it on Google Files download page, where it feels like you are downloading a virus. Highly recommended, and I've tested it clean after playing it for close to a decade now. Thank you for that email. I've heard of Brogue. I don't know how I've heard of Brogue, but I feel like I've heard of Brogue. So I didn't know it was so obscure, but now I kind of want to check it out. Obviously, the other three, very lauded games. FTL is like massive on my backlog. I absolutely need to play FTL sooner than later, mostly because of Into the Breach, same dev. But yeah, I need to play FTL.
I love when a Mount Rushmore has just like a random game like that, something that feels very personal. And yeah, thank you, Rob, for taking the time to write in. Now, I know not all of our episodes have like themes like the Mount Rushmore one did, but I will say, folks, if you ever want to send us any comments or like thoughts or how you felt about one of the games that we brought to the quest log, I would love to hear other people's perspectives on any of these games. So like if you played ZeroRanger or Roottrees Are Dead or whatever, if you played those and you want to write in and let us know where you would have placed it and what you thought of the game, definitely do so. We'll be happy to read them on the next episode.
The other thing I'll add is, this isn't like our shtick. We've not done this, but I think that episode was super. People love lists.
They do.
So while we might not center an entire episode around it quite like we did that one, at least not for a long time, if anyone out there has like a top 3 indie something discussion they want us to have, I think we'd be more than happy to have it in like a campfire chat type of scenario. So,
Okay, I haven't talked too much because I was still trying to figure out the name of this game, and I figured it out. It's called Hell Pie. It's called Hell Pie. I don't know if you guys heard of that game, but that's the name of the game. And it was kind of like, it's one of those things where it's like, I want to try to find a spooky game. Maybe I'll do a 3D platformer. It was just very jank, and it was kind of like, I was like, yeah, I don't think this is quest log material, but I had fun with it for a few hours. So if you want something that's really janky and it's a 3D platformer, there you go. But yeah, I agree with you guys. If you guys have any, if the audience has any comments or suggestions for topics, or even like if there's like, hey, maybe do like a lot of times when we come up with like our random like topics for an episode, we're just like shooting ideas out there. If there's something like that, you can even shoot that to us. Like, oh, we had a comment recently within the last few months that someone's like, let's do an RPG episode, and that's actually on our short list of doing eventually down the line. So if you have ideas like that, send it to us.
Heck yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of sending things to us, let's plug ourselves. You can find the show, IndieQuest Pod, on Blue Sky, or you can send us emails, IndieQuestPod@gmail.com. Steve, where can they find you on the internet?
Twitch and Blue Sky as Blinkoom. That's Blink, OOM, M like magazine. Seth, where can they find you?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Captain Drachma, and of course in the Polymedia Discord, best place on the internet. If you want to get into that Discord, head on over to Patreon, search Polymedia, jump into the tier that gets you into the Discord, and come and chat with us. Josh, where can I find you?
You can find me, Josh Leslie, or Josh Leslie, if you're a Drunk Friend fan, on Blue Sky. We love it over there on Blue Sky. You can find more shows like this and adjacent to, if you're into geek culture, you like movies, video games, nostalgia, go to polymedianetwork.com. There's bound to be another podcast for you. They're all our friends over there, and they all make awesome shows that you should be listening to. Well, Steve, why don't you close out the show with some parting words for the folks out there?
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Hopefully the start of your year has gone well, and you're getting into those games. The releases are finally starting to happen, all right? Roottrees Are Dead marked the start of the new release calendar in my mind. So go out there, solve some mysteries, and figure out who the heck your great-grandma on your dad's side is.
I do want to add something. I know this is the worst time to do it ever.
Okay,
but
go ahead.
This is for the true listeners, all right? If
I
you're
know.
still here hearing this aside, you earned it.
Yeah, if you're not, just click over to Bombcast or whatever you're listening to next.
This is like when an album puts like 20 minutes of silence and then hides a hidden track at the end. That's what you're doing here. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is a big aside, though. I don't know. And, we can always cut it on the cutting room floor if we need to.
We're here.
But I felt like maybe we should mention that we're going to be doing an episode on Transistor the next episode.
Yeah,
True,
we should
yeah.
probably mention that.
Literally, next episode will be about Transistor. We didn't forget about the goal to play through all the SuperGiant games.
Yeah, so next episode, if you guys want to play along over the next 2 weeks, we haven't. I don't think any of us has started it yet. Have you guys?
No.
Yet? I haven't myself, but the game's pretty short. I think it's around 10 to 12 hours, depending on how much you do in the side missions and stuff. But yeah, play Transistor. And we'll have a review episode. We'll have no spoilers at the top. We'll talk about our feelings and put it on the quest log. And then after all that, we'll do some spoiler talk. So,
Heck yeah. All right.
See you guys then.
Goodbye.
Peace.